Hello, everybody. Welcome to week 3 of the course. Kind of crazy to believe, but we're actually a third of the way through the course, so the summer session goes pretty fast. I hope you guys had a good Memorial Day weekend. Summer has unofficially started. Uh, doesn't mean quite as much when you're in Florida as like I was in Virginia before, so it's not quite as big of a deal, right? But hopefully, you guys had a chance to get out and enjoy that. The holiday is also the reason why I'm posting the video today versus yesterday. And because I'm doing that, I'm going to give you guys an extension on when your discussion will be due. So I'll still post the discussion question on Wednesday, tomorrow. Um, but rather than it being the final being due on Sunday, it'll be due on Monday by midnight. And then next week we'll get back on schedule. Okay. Uh, yeah, good job on the discussions last week. I thought you guys did a really good job of sort of relating what Hobbes was talking about in Leviathan and the state of nature being a state of war to the road, right? Which is a scary representation of kind of what Hobbes had in mind, right? So just a reminder to sort of get full credit on the discussion, you need to answer my question within 24 hours, and then you need to respond to a classmate normally by Sunday at midnight. This week it'll be Monday at midnight. So, um, okay. So also right now I'm taking this sort of class on how to teach online classes, and they recommended rather than doing one long video, you do shorter videos, right? So people can have time to watch them as they go along. So this week I'm going to break the weekly video into 2 weeks, so you guys will have somewhat of a break in the middle, so you don't have to hear me drone on. So the way I'm going to break it down, I think, and you guys can let me know in the comments if you think this is working. I'll do announcements and I'll talk briefly about last week, and then I'll do another video where I'll sort of introduce what we're looking at this upcoming week. So last week, obviously, we were looking at Hobbes, right, and Leviathan. And Hobbes' theory is that sort of the state of nature is a state of war. Man's natural state is a state of war between men, and we looked at the movie The Road, right, to see if that was an accurate portrayal, and I asked you guys about similarities and differences between them. Obviously, there were similarities, right? That's the reason that I chose the movie. Yeah, it's a pretty scary place. First of all, right? So that was Hobbes' overarching point. You don't want to be in the state of nature, right? And Hobbes would argue that it's preferable to be in a dictatorship, like think about North Korea, somewhere like that, right? Maybe even if you're a woman, maybe even it would be preferable to be living in a country where women's rights don't exist rather than the state of nature, right? I mean, that's a debatable question, but Hobbes thinks the state of nature is something to be avoided at all costs, right? And there are three sort of driving forces behind that. Number one, Hobbes says it's not a state of war because people are evil, right? It's because people are primarily self-interested, right? They care about themselves and their own self-preservation first and foremost, right? Which is hard to disagree with, although there were some counterexamples that we'll look at, right? The second thing is that people are equal, right? So by and large, people are primarily equal. There's no Superman living on the planet who can dominate, right? Who can dominate everybody else and take what they want without any consequences. And finally, this is sort of, some people would say the realists in the world would say that this is the tragedy of humanity is that we've been thrust into a situation where there are limited resources, right? And because we're equal, because we're all interested in taking care of ourselves, and finally, because there are limited resources, that puts us in a state of natural competition against one another, right? So that's what leads to this state of war. And Hobbes would say, well, there's a way out of that, and the way out of that is to create a state who can mediate differences between individuals, right? So that's why Hobbes thinks it's a good idea to create this kind of state. So what were the differences that we saw in The Road? One, and this was a really good point brought up by somebody, was by several people actually, was the relationship between the father and the son, right? The man and the boy. This is something that Hobbes doesn't really talk about, right? In his thought experiment, he's only talking about individuals. He's not talking about people who are in relationships, right? So the relationship between a father and a son, right? And this is interesting too, and a pretty strong argument that can be leveled against Hobbes is that who in the world is an individual who has no responsibilities, no ties to anybody else. None of us were hatched out of an egg, right? We were all born into a family, and we all have these familial relationships that moderate our own self-interest. So that's certainly a criticism that can be leveled against Hobbes. Number two is that it seems like the boy himself is innocent, right? It seems like the boy is concerned about the well-being of other people, and doesn't think that the dad should, like, for example, the guy who stole their stuff, right? He thinks that the man should show more compassion towards that guy. So it seems like the boy has sort of this natural sense of morality and natural sense of compassion, right? Another thing that people brought up was, and this is sort of, ironic in a way, because it seems like they're the bad guys, right? The marauders, the people that are, have banded together and they're running, terrorizing people essentially. Those are people that are not just individually motivated, right? They've decided that it's in their best interest to actually come together and form some sort of collective. Um, but of course, that collective is you could even say it's done in their own self-interest, right? They're doing it because they realize if we come together and do this, then we're more likely to get the stuff that I want, right? So that's probably how Hobbes would respond to that. But you could also say that, look, that is a proto state, right? That group, that's essentially what Hobbes wants us to do. He just wants us to do it on a grand scale, right? So let's see. Anything else? Overview of that. Yeah, the question about the good guys, right? Why is it the case? Does the boy always want to know? Are we still the good guys? Right? And it raises an interesting question because according to Hobbes, in the state of nature, there is no morality, right? There is no justice, injustice. There's no good. There's no bad. There's just survival, right? So I was curious to know what you guys thought about if the fact that the boy keeps referencing this notion of the good guys, is that something that's you know sort of goes counter to what Hobbes is saying regarding morality in the state of nature. Of course, Hobbes could say, well, the boy wasn't born, or there's the man and the boy were coming from a different age where there was morality, where there was civilization. So these notions of good and bad that they have are just sort of remnants of before. So anyway, okay, that's a recap and sort of announcements for this coming week. So I'll see you in part two, where I'll talk about Rousseau and Rousseau's different account of man's natural state.